This is the Red Line, and I am your host, Jimmy Red. Thanks for tuning in. Another fantastic week of college football. Week number 4 is in the books, folks. So that means week number 5 of the college football rankings are out. And to nobody's surprise, the team on top of those rankings yet again is an SEC team, Alabama. Obviously the best team in the country, hands down. I haven't seen anybody that can touch them. They had a matchup this week that I thought could have happened that we'll get into later on during this podcast to discuss that matchup between Jimbo's Texas A&M and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Coming in second, we have Georgia. Georgia is a stacked squad. They have awesome running backs. They have a good quarterback. Their other quarterback transferred to Washington. He's setting out, but they have good everything going there as well. They were runners-up in the national championship last year, so a great school there as well. No surprise to see them in at number 2. Number 3 is Clemson. Big news coming out of Clemson the other day there. They changed starting quarterbacks. Kelly Bryant has decided that he will transfer. He will then only have played 3 games this year, meaning that he is eligible. No, he's played 4 games. So he is eligible at this moment still to redshirt and have a year of eligibility left in college. This is his senior year, so he's going to redshirt, be a grad. He'll be a 5th-year senior or a grad player wherever he decides to transfer to because of his redshirt year that he's using this year. So he will transfer out of Clemson, and the new starter there will be Trevor Lawrence. We will discuss that a little bit later on as well into this podcast. Ohio State, 4th. A little lower than where they started the season out. Urban Meyer's back after his win last week against Tulane. This week's got a big matchup against Penn State. So it's going to be great to see what he can do. So we'll see what happens there. They had a big win without him there with Ryan Day winning against TCU the week before he came back. So exciting there. They're still in the top 5. 5th coming in, a team that's made a lot of moves since the year started. Started the season off preseason 25. Now up to 5th after huge wins. They beat Auburn, and they beat some other big schools during this process. LSU. So LSU in the top 5. Some other ones that are mentioned are in the top 10. We'll run these down for you real quick. We have Oklahoma, who has Kyler Murray, the kid who was drafted to play baseball as their quarterback. I don't see him playing football in the pros. I see him going to play professional baseball after his years at Oklahoma. After that, we go into a team I really, really, really like. We're really going to get into their game here later on where they defeated Oregon earlier this week, and that's Stanford. Stanford is amazing, coached by David Shaw, their quarterback, their running game, everything. We'll break that down later on. They're in at 7. Then they got Notre Dame. Notre Dame's got Kelly Wimbish as a quarterback, as we know. Struggled a little bit, but they've came alive in this year, still undefeated, haven't lost yet. Those two face off, Notre Dame and Stanford, this week. I'm so stoked for that matchup. You have a 7-8 matchup. I'm fired up to see a matchup between top 10 teams. That's going to be a great game to watch. Coming in at 9 is Penn State. Penn State has a huge matchup coming up this week as well. They're facing against Ohio State, as I mentioned. So I'm excited to see what Penn State can do, see how these new kids fill in for them with their running game, as in Sanders filling in for Saquon. So we'll see how that goes. They still have Trace McSorley, though. So excited to see what Penn State can do. And coming in 10th, I think could be a tie for 10. They don't have it as a tie for 10, but they have Auburn in at 10. I know Auburn defeated the team that set in 11 earlier in the year, being Washington in Game 1. Washington obviously was Game 1, still had them jitters, so I'm thinking those two teams could be tied for 10th. And then 11th is a team I really, really, really like that I have to mention because I really like watching them. And I think they got the Heisman candidate and possibly the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy on Will Grier. As you guys know, Will Grier is a kid with the PEDs who tested at Florida, then transferred, went to West Virginia, and is now the starting quarterback there. I love Will Grier. I think he's a phenomenal quarterback. I think he is probably one of the best ones to come out of the draft this year. A lot of people are high on Drew Lock out of Missouri, but I'm a huge fan of Will Grier. I think he'll be a better fit. His father's a coach, so he has knowledge since a young age of the game. That's something to keep an eye on. A lot of people don't pay attention to that. I do. I look into the history and all that stuff. His father was a coach. He's got 2 brothers, both huge people in the entertainment industry that made themselves famous on videos, online. So there's already fame in his family, so he knows how to handle that. And as I mentioned, his father was a coach. So his awareness for the game of football and his awareness of being somebody famous is going to be fine for him. So I think Will Grier has all the combinations to be a fantastic NFL quarterback. And hopefully the people see that in the NFL draft just like I do. I see him being the best quarterback to come out, but a lot of people see Drew Lock. So with the rankings being out and the games that happened last week, we're going to look at a couple of the games that happened, and some of them are being the Mississippi State Bulldogs faced Kentucky. I don't know what to say there. All I can say is, wow. Because Mississippi State entered this game 14th in the country. Kentucky entered this game 3-0. Kentucky was on rails. This is the first time Kentucky's done something like this in a long time. Kentucky looks really, really good. They did not let Nick Fitzgerald do too much. Nick Fitzgerald entered this season being one of the Heisman favorites to do it. He had no touchdowns in this game. He had one interception, but no touchdowns. He only threw for 145 yards against Kentucky. When you think of Kentucky, you don't think football. You think basketball. You think John Calipari. You do not think football. But this year, they have got it going on. The passing game on the other side of the ball with Terry Wilson, not very much going on for him either. He only tried to throw the ball 14 times, so not a whole lot of throws, and he only had 71 yards. He didn't have any touchdowns himself either. But the running game for them went absolutely crazy. That SEC defense there at Mississippi State could not stop. Benny Snell Jr. went crazy on them. I mean, my man had 25 carries, 165 yards, averaged 6.6 per carries, and he had 4 rushing touchdowns. 4 rushing touchdowns against an SEC school, and especially one that's ranked that high up into the country. That's pretty stout for a running back. He's done something that Jonathan Taylor hasn't done yet this year, or Bryce Love. So he looked phenomenal doing that game. I'm not saying he's a Heisman favorite, but he had a fantastic game doing that. And Kentucky put themselves on the map, stating they're here in the SEC and they're alive and ready to go. I think they're not a team to really fight too hard in the SEC because you got to worry about Georgia and Alabama and all the other bigger schools and even Texas A&M. But putting a mission out there and going up, beating the Heisman favorite, Nick Fitzgerald, and showing Mississippi State, who has always been a force to mess with against Alabama, just like Ole Miss, both places from down there in Mississippi are always tough for Alabama to beat. And for Kentucky to go in there and do it, that's a mission, and that's a statement on Michigan's side, or not Michigan, Kentucky's side to show we've stepped our program up and we're ready to play football. So a huge win for Kentucky there as they defeated the Mississippi State Bulldogs 28-17 last week. That's a huge win, and I think Kentucky's going to jump up inside the rankings here very soon, if not next week. Another crazy matchup in my mind. I kind of didn't see this one coming, but I did at the same time. That was where the Ball State Eagles played the Purdue Boilermakers. The Boilermakers entered this game with no wins entering this. So they were completely shut out through the year. But they were close in everything they had. They should have won a couple other games, but were unable to do that. Their quarterback, David Blau, had a really good game. I mean, he threw for 270 yards and had 3 touchdowns. He had a good game since the first time of the bowl game they had. So a really good game on his end. Sorry there, folks. I have an itch on my nose. And their wide receiver they have there is phenomenal. Probably the best one in the country, which is a surprise. You don't really hear superstars coming out of Purdue very often. The last one you can really name, I mean, you might think Kyle Orton, but Kyle Orton wasn't too big. He started a couple years for Chicago, kind of fell apart after that. The name you really think of, Drew Brees. I haven't really heard of a lot of great people coming out of Purdue, but they have this wide receiver, and Randall Moore. Oh my God, phenomenal. In my mind, he's the best wide receiver in the country. I've not seen a kid who could catch a football like this guy in college in a while. He's like a Julio Jones. He's even better than a Calvin Ridley was in Alabama. So this kid, Randall Moore, is phenomenal. He had 5 catches, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is a true freshman. True freshman. And he looks phenomenal for Purdue. Boston College, though, did not have the game they were looking for. Their starting quarterback, Anthony Brown, only threw for 96 yards, had a touchdown and 4 interceptions. That Big Ten defense really stepped up. Everybody talks about Boston College's defense being tough because you can name a couple players that have came out of there on the defensive side. A big one to name here in Carolina, Luke Kuechly. Boston College has always been a very good college. They had to bump this game up because of the weather. Maybe that had something to do with Boston College, but I'm unsure. But Indianapolis's Purdue, or Southern Indy's Purdue, came in there and was ready to play a game at home, and they put a hurting on them. A huge win for Purdue, especially after being close on the last 3 games before that, but coming in against a ranked opponent, not giving up against Boston College. Huge statement for Randall Moore, the wide receiver. Huge statement for the quarterback. The running game even had a pretty good game as well for them. The team rushed for 76 yards total. I mean, not a whole lot of rushing yards, but it was ran when they needed to. Made the plays and got them into nice third down in middle and short, manageable areas most of the time and allowed them to get the ball moved forward. And they kept the ball in their hands and did not turn it over. That's why Purdue won this game. Watch out for Purdue. That's something they tend not to do very often. They tend to not turn his football over this year. So watch out for Purdue. Purdue could be a force to reckon with for some of these bigger teams in the Big Ten, as in Ohio State, Penn State. And that battle of the old oak and bucket with Indiana is going to be a phenomenal one this year because Indiana looks good with their quarterback and Peyton Ramsey, and Purdue looks good with theirs with David Bloss. So it's going to be an awesome series between them two. I'm excited to see what Purdue can do in the Big Ten, considering they've flexed their muscle and showed Boston College what they can do. So they're real this year. Huge win for Purdue with a 30-13 win over Boston College. Another one. This one here, I didn't really want to talk too much about the game. I just really want to talk about the scenario that's going on. That would be the Clemson-Georgia Tech game. Clemson came out and said that they have a new starter. Their new starter is going to be Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence threw 4 touchdowns in this game. Phenomenal game for Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is a freshman, as we all know. He went 13 for 18, 178 yards, and 4 touchdowns with 1 interception. Kelly Bryant, who was their starting quarterback, has seemed to work the offense a little better up until this moment, had 56 yards, 6 for 10, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Then Dabo comes out and says, Trevor Lawrence is our starter. Kelly Bryant then says, I've played in 4 games. This is the cutoff for me. If I stay here, it's going to hurt me because I want to be the starter. So, he's transferring. Kelly Bryant is going to transfer out of Clemson and be one of the biggest pickups of next year for a quarterback. Who is going to get Kelly Bryant sweepstakes is going to be phenomenal. I'm so excited to see this. But that kid they have now, oh my Lord, Trevor Lawrence, that kid is phenomenal. I think he is going to be a really good quarterback. He's something that they have not seen in Clemson. I don't believe since Dabo has been there because most of the quarterbacks that he has had have been dual threat quarterbacks. He had Deshaun Watson and he had, I cannot remember the kid before his name, but he had him as well, and he was a dual threat quarterback. So they had 2 dual threat quarterbacks before Kelly Bryant. Dabo is yet to have a pocket passing quarterback, and Trevor Lawrence is the one. I'm excited to see what Dabo does with a passing style quarterback, and he's still got that running game in the backfield with Travis Etienne, who I believe is going to the draft this year. Etienne had a fantastic game as well. 11 carries, 121 yards on 11 carries. Oh my God, that's 11 yards a carry. And he rushed in himself for a touchdown. So Travis Etienne, phenomenal running back. If not one of the best in the country, he's right there at the top of the list, arguing with Bryce Love and Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers. So he's right there at the top, fighting for one of the best running backs in the country, Travis Etienne. But a huge win there by Clemson, number 3 team in the country, 94-21 over a matchup in the ACC, Georgia Tech. So a huge win by Clemson. But the bigger news is, as I mentioned, Trevor Lawrence, now the starting quarterback, and Kelly Bryant to transfer to a new college. So sweepstakes are to start. Now, the game I'm so fired up and pumped about. This is the one, I don't know how much people really know about it or how much they really care, but man, I love Stanford. I just think David Shaw is a phenomenal coach. And a lot of people had their love on this Justin Herbert kid. That's that quarterback at Oregon. He's a very good quarterback. Very good quarterback. He threw for 346 yards, had 1 touchdown and interception. But he could not make plays late in the game. Their defense looked good at the start and fell apart at the end. The quarterback on the other side, who goes to Stanford, which we all know has better academics, which means you're smarter. And if you're a smarter person, you tend to make better decisions. KJ Costello. Man. I know that kid's probably not going to be a quarterback in the NFL, but he is very, very smart. And he will be able to help a team riding the bench by knowing the knowledge of the game. 327 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then, we got a guy in the backfield that everybody likes to talk about, Bryce Love. Not a phenomenal game for Bryce Love at all. 19 carries, 89 yards. He only averaged 4.5 per carry. Only had a touchdown. So not a phenomenal game. His longest run was only 12 yards. For a guy who's running for Heisman, not a phenomenal game. This is a game that you could probably just mark off of his list and say, all right, he had a bad game, and look at the rest of them. Everybody's allowed 1, maybe 2 games, depending on how good your best game is. This is one of his for Bryce Love. But they were able to come back and win this game in somehow an incredible fashion. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And it was amazing. I watched the game while they were down, 13 with like 3 minutes left in the game. They outscored the team that they played 31-7 in the second half in overtime. Think about that real quick. 31 points to 7 in the second half of the game after being down. David Shaw rallied his troops and got them back in the game, and they got hot. It was absolutely phenomenal. It was one of the best games I have seen David Shaw coach as a head coach, which is exactly why that man right there should be an NFL head coach. He brought a kid who's not even an NFL-style quarterback in KJ Costello into war and won the game in overtime, 38-21, and they were the higher-ranked team and were still underdogs in that game to Oregon. Oregon was the favorite to win it, but Stanford still won that game. Now, the real test is this week. You had a tough game last week. Now you have to travel to South Bend, Indiana. You just were in Oregon, not too far of a travel from where you were, but now you have to travel to South Bend, Indiana, a team that is ranked 8th in the nation, just below you. This team you just played was 20th. A team that's just below you in Notre Dame ranked 8th. Quarterback's not as good in Brian Wimbish, but their defense is better. And you know they're always ready to play. So, the real test is going to be how do they do in back-to-back big matchups. One big matchup after another. David Shaw needs to bring his troops into war because this is where the fight starts for them. Because they still have to play teams like Washington to win the Pac-12 and USC to win this Pac-12. If they win this Pac-12, there's no reason why Stanford should not be in the Final Four. And I like Stanford to be in the Final Four this year. So, folks, keep an eye on Stanford after this huge 38-31 win in overtime versus Oregon. So that's all we have here on the Red Line for college football. Make sure you tune in next week for week number 5 of college football when we break down some of the big marquee matchups that happened that week in football. We'll see you guys.